Okay, so nudge theory. Nudge theory, okay, first of all, what is it not? Nudging behaviour is not something that we consciously think about. So it's not creating a law or a rule that we have to stick by. That isn't nudging our behaviour, that is dictating our behaviour. And if we have a law, whether we follow that law or not, we make a conscious decision to do so. That's not manipulating our behaviour, which effectively is what nudge is. It's manipulating our behaviour without us knowing about it. And there's lots of examples of nudges. The Behavioural Insights Unit, which used to be, which still is part of the Cabinet Office in the UK, uses nudge a great deal and advises the UK government on how to create behaviour that is preferred by the government and is preferred in society. But here's a few examples of nudging. The first nudge, or one of the first and most famous nudges, was at an airport in the Netherlands, and it was in the gents' toilets. And what was happening was they were spending a fortune on cleaning the gents' toilets, because unfortunately gents aren't necessarily very clean when they're at the urinals. And what someone did is they came up with the idea of having something to focus on. So they created a small plastic sticker which was a fly, and they stuck it in the urinal, pretty much in the centre of the urinal. And what happened is that all of the guys going to the urinals aimed at the fly, and cleaning bills dropped massively because it gave guys something to aim at. Now that's a good example of nudging behaviour without someone realise that they're being nudged. It also might be a comment on how clean gents are in public toilets, but that's besides the point. That was one of the first and most famous examples of a successful nudge. Another example is commonly now used in supermarkets, particularly in the US, but others picking it up, which is putting green arrows on the floor. And actually, there's no explanation as to what these green arrows are pointing towards. But in actual fact, what they are pointing towards is generally the organic vegetable aisle. And the first supermarket that did this noticed a huge increase, I think it's about 4 times increase, in the amount of organic vegetables that they were selling. So it wasn't signposted, it wasn't saying organic veg over here, it was simply saying these are some green arrows on the floor. And the subconscious mind, the system 1 processing, was recognising the fact that that must mean healthy eating. And so it pushed the rational, the conscious side of people towards the healthy eating aisle. Again, that's a classic example of nudge, because it's creating a behaviour and we're not aware of why we are doing it, but we do it anyway. A really interesting bias that we have is the Goldilocks Effect. And now Goldilocks, eating the porridge. One bowl was too hot, one bowl was too cold. The middle bowl was just right. In the beds, one bed was too big, one bed was too small, the middle bowl was just right. And it seems that we are partially hardwired into choosing the just right option. Good example of this is going into a restaurant and ordering from a wine list. Typically, most people will not buy the most expensive wine. Typically, most people will not buy the cheapest wine. They will be looking at the middle section of wines. And there may be lots of reasons and lots of rational reasons for this. It may be, well, the most expensive is too expensive. The cheapest, well, we don't want to look too cheap. But regardless of that, bottles of wine that are just above the cheapest level typically will be the ones with the most profit margin. The cheapest will probably be very good value, and should be very good value, because you shouldn't put a bottle of wine on your wine list that's terrible anyway. The most expensive won't have been marked up massively because they were expensive to buy from their wine merchant in the first place. They couldn't put huge amounts of profit margin on it. The real profit margins in wine come in the middle section. And what we do consistently is choose that middle section as if we've got comparisons. So our comparison's the most expensive, our comparison's the cheapest, well, we'll go for the middle, because it must be better than the cheapest, and it's not as expensive, it's not as stupidly expensive as the most expensive one. So companies use this a lot. Another example was there was a chip provider, Intel, and they produced a chip, a microprocessing chip, and it was fantastic and it did everything, and that was the only chip that they had. And sales were okay, but compared to their competitors, it was okay. And what they realised is that they needed other chips for people to compare them to that weren't their competitors. So they took a load of functionality away from the chip. And then they took a load more functionality away. So they had 3 types of chip. Now, obscurely, the least functional chip was the one that cost them more to produce, because they produced the top level one, and then they had to take some away, then they had to take some more away, which took effort. But the least functional one was priced at the cheapest level. Obviously the medium functional one was priced at a medium level, and the original chip was priced at the highest level. And what happened is that everyone, or far more people, were going for the middle chip than their competitors, than choosing their competitors' chips. And the reason is because they had something to compare it to. They didn't want the most expensive, that was too expensive in relation to the other chips. They didn't want the cheapest because they thought the functionality might be too low and there's no value in it. So they went for the middle chip. This happens a lot in all kinds of businesses, and in the service industries as well. If we've got 3 different services on offer, people will generally plump for what is the middle ground. They won't necessarily go for the cheapest, they won't necessarily go for the most expensive. Goldilocks effect.